I don't really know how to start this without sounding like some guy trying to farm internet sympathy, but I swear that's not what this is. I'm writing this because I need to get it out of my head. And because every time I replay that night, my mom dying, my sister whispering that she didn't want me there, something in me twists like a knife that never got taken out. The whole thing happened 9 months ago. But the fallout? That didn't really hit until Thanksgiving. That's when everything cracked open. That's when the truth hit the table harder than any of the drama my family had already survived. And I'll get into that, I promise. But first, the night itself. My mom had been in the hospital for 3 weeks. Pancreatic cancer. One of the worst kinds. One of those diagnoses where every doctor gives you that soft, controlled tone that basically means, start saying your goodbyes. My sister, Lauren, had been at her bedside nonstop. She was the golden child from birth. Not even in the annoying, braggy way. More like she had this lifelong gravitational pull around her. Teachers loved her, neighbors loved her, my parents adored her. Meanwhile, I was the kid who kept to himself, who didn't fit neatly into any role the family seemed to have carved out. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't troubled. I was just extra. Excess. Not quite what anyone pictured having around. So, of course, when the hospital called saying mom had taken a bad turn, Lauren got there first. I showed up 10 minutes later. 10 minutes. And somehow that was enough time for her to build a whole wall between me and the room. I remember walking down the hallway, cold, too bright, that sterile smell that hits you in the back of your throat, and seeing Lauren standing outside the door. She looked wrecked, like mascara smudged, hair messy, sweater pulled over her hands wrecked. For a second, I felt this weird flicker of sibling closeness, like, okay, we're both going through something awful, and maybe for once we're on the same page emotionally. I should have known better. As I got closer, she wiped her face, pulled herself together just enough, and said, quiet as a breath, "She doesn't want you in there." I thought I misheard. "What?" "Not right now," she said. "She's tired. She asked for just me." I can't really explain the type of shame that hits you in a hospital hallway when someone tells you your dying parent doesn't want to see you. It's not like normal embarrassment. It's heavier, deeper, like someone just pressed an old bruise on your soul and said, "Yeah, this hurt before. Let's make it hurt worse." My first instinct was to push past her. I should have. God, I should have. But Lauren had always been this immovable authority when it came to anything family-related. She always spoke like she had the final say. More than that, she always carried herself like she was doing everything out of some pure, almost holy sense of responsibility. So when she said mom didn't want me inside, it felt believable. I backed away. She slipped inside the room. And I stood in that hallway for 36 minutes. I counted. Because when your brain is trying to survive something it can't handle, you latch onto anything that feels like control. For me, it was time. I watched the minute marks on my phone screen like they were lifelines. Sometimes I heard muffled crying from inside the room. Sometimes voices. At one point I thought I heard mom say something. But it could have been anything. Or it could have been nothing. You start doubting your own senses when you're that stressed. Then the nurse came out. I'll never forget her face. Tight, shaky, eyes glassy like she'd been holding back tears for too long. I straightened up immediately, expecting to hear the words. The sentence everyone dreads but knows is coming. But she didn't say it. She just stared at me for a second, then slowly held out this tiny, crumpled piece of paper. "For you," she said quietly. She said your name. I froze. Everything in me froze. I didn't even take it at first. I just stared at the paper like it was radioactive. When I finally reached out, it felt warm, like someone had been holding it tight. I wanted to go inside then, more than anything. But the nurse kind of shook her head, just barely. "I'm sorry," she whispered. That's when I knew. Mom was gone, and I wasn't in the room. Because Lauren told me not to be. The nurse squeezed my arm gently, then walked off, wiping her eyes. I just stood there with this crushed scrap of paper burning a hole in my palm. I didn't even unfold it until the hallway was completely empty. My name was written on the outside in my mom's handwriting. Shaky, thin, but definitely hers. Inside, I'll tell you later. Because what she wrote changed everything. And because if I say it now, none of the later parts will hit the way they're supposed to. What I will say is this. Whatever was on that note was something my sister never wanted me to see. Something she actively kept from me. And I didn't know that until Thanksgiving, when I sat across from her at our dad's table, pulled out the note, and placed it right next to her fork. The second she looked down, her face drained. Her fork slipped out of her hand and clattered onto the plate. And she said, almost whispering, "You weren't supposed to see that." And that's where the Rayal story begins. Thanksgiving at my dad's house was already a landmine before I even walked in. It was the first major holiday without Mom, and nobody really knew how to handle it. Dad tried to play it cool, tried to act like hosting would keep things normal, but his version of normal has always been held together with duct tape and wishful thinking. The man burns dinner when he's calm. You can imagine what his cooking looked like when he was grieving. I showed up late on purpose. I didn't want to do that awkward thing where everyone watches you take off your coat like you're entering a crime scene. By the time I got there, most of the family was already seated or milling around. The house smelled like turkey and cinnamon candles, this weird mix of cozy and suffocating. The kind of smell that makes you feel like you should be happy, even when you're not. Lauren was already at the table. And let me tell you, seeing her was like being punched in the chest all over again. Not because she looked guilty, not because she looked sad, but because she looked normal. Perfectly normal. Like her little stunt in the hospital hallway hadn't completely rewired something in me. She smiled when she saw me. A tight, polite smile. The kind you give a coworker you barely tolerate. Not a brother. Not someone you spent your entire childhood with. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I said back. And that was it. That single syllable was already more forgiveness than she deserved. Dinner started like any other family dinner where people are pretending everything is fine. There was small talk. Jokes that didn't land. My aunt doing her usual thing where she asked overly personal questions in a tone so sweet you couldn't call her out without looking like an ass. And all through it, Lauren kept glancing at me. Quick, nervous looks, like she was waiting for something. She didn't know I brought the note with me. I'd been carrying it around for days. Not in a dramatic way. More like, I didn't know where it belonged. I didn't want to hide it in a drawer or leave it in my car. It felt wrong. It felt like Mom's voice was trapped inside that folded paper, and keeping it out of sight felt like muting her on purpose. I didn't know what I'd do with it at Thanksgiving. But the second I saw Lauren sitting there acting like my presence was just another box on her holiday checklist, something in me clicked. Dad asked her to pass the mashed potatoes. She did. Someone brought up football. Someone else said something about a Black Friday sale. And while nobody was looking, I reached into my jacket. The note was small, just a square that had been ripped from the corner of a notepad. I set it down next to her plate, right where her fork rested. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise, like placing evidence on the table. She didn't notice at first. She kept eating, kept nodding along to whatever conversation was happening. But eventually her eyes dropped to her plate and then to the paper, and her whole body froze. You know when someone goes pale so fast it's like watching a candle get blown out? That was her. Her face drained color in real time. Her fork slipped from her hand and hit the plate with that sharp metal-on-ceramic clang that shut down every conversation in the room. She whispered it, but the whole table heard. "You weren't supposed to see that." And then everything went silent. Dad looked confused. My aunt froze mid-chew. My cousin stared at me like I'd just detonated something. And Lauren, she looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. "What's that?" Dad asked finally, pointing to the note. Lauren swallowed hard. It's nothing." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Not the funny kind of laugh. The kind that comes from something ugly and raw. "Nothing? Really?" She looked at me, eyes wide, pleading. "Can we talk about this later?" "No," I said, and I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The word landed like a hammer. I could feel every pair of eyes shift between us, but I didn't care. This wasn't some petty sibling fight. This wasn't some long-held resentment boiling over. This was the moment everything stopped being unspoken. Dad cleared his throat. "What's going on?" Lauren opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at the note again like she wished she could snatch it off the table and swallow it whole. "You told me Mom didn't want me in the room," I said quietly. "You told me she asked for just you. Do you remember that?" She nodded slowly. Her eyes brimmed with tears she was trying so hard to blink away. "Ah, yes. I remember. And this note," I continued, tapping it lightly, "was written during the time you told me to stay outside." Dad's face shifted. He didn't say anything, but I could see something tightening in his jaw. Lauren covered her mouth with her hand. "I didn't think you'd ever." "Ever what?" I asked. "Ever see what Mom actually wanted to tell me? Ever know she wasn't too tired to see me? Ever find out you lied to me on the last night I could have spoken to her? Her breath hitched. One shaky inhale. Then another. Please, she whispered. Not here. Not in front of everyone. And here's the part that still surprises me when I replay it in my head. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Because she looked like she was crumbling. Like she'd been holding some impossible weight since the night Mom died. But then I remembered that hallway. I remembered standing there counting minutes. I remembered the nurse handing me that folded paper with tears in her eyes. So no, I didn't feel bad. If not here, I said. Then when? Lauren didn't answer. She just stared at the note like it was a ticking bomb. It wasn't. But what was inside? That was the part that blew our family apart. And I hadn't even told them what it said yet. I didn't plan to read the note out loud. I didn't walk into Thanksgiving thinking, yeah, let's drop a nuclear truth bomb between the turkey and the cranberry sauce. But once Lauren started shaking her head and whispering, please don't, something inside me hardened. A line I didn't even know I'd drawn for myself finally got crossed. The whole table was waiting. Not in a dramatic TV show way. More like nobody wanted to move because they didn't want to be the one who accidentally made noise during a moment they shouldn't even be witnessing. Dad finally cleared his throat. Son, he said quietly, maybe give her a second. No, I said, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care that he sounded disappointed. She had my seconds, my minutes, my time, the last time I ever could have talked to Mom, and she used it to shut me out. Lauren's shoulders curled inward like she was trying to disappear. I didn't mean to hurt you. That's the thing, I said. I think you did. The note sat on the linen tablecloth like this flimsy little scrap that somehow weighed more than everything else in the room combined. I picked it up. My fingers were shaking, but not from emotion, from adrenaline. From knowing that once I did this, nothing in our family would ever go back to the way it was. Dad looked from me to Lauren, his eyes narrowing in confusion. What did your mother write? I unfolded it slowly. I'd read it 100 times since the hospital, but even now it still felt like I was holding my breath underwater. The handwriting was small, uneven, almost like she was forcing every letter to stay on the page. It wasn't long, just 2 sentences. Tell him I'm sorry I wasn't better. Tell him I love him more than I ever said. That was it. No dramatic last wish. No secret confession. Just Mom finally saying something she never said out loud enough when she was alive. But the important part wasn't what she wrote. It was who she asked to give it to me. I held the note up just slightly. Mom wrote this while I was standing in the hallway. She asked someone, probably the nurse, to give it to me. And Lauren told me Mom didn't want to see me. She made me stay outside instead of letting me go in and hear this from her directly. Lauren let out a little choking sound, something between a sob and a gasp. I didn't know she wrote that. Not exactly. I didn't know what it said. Really? I asked. Because you sure reacted like you did. She shook her head hard. I only saw her write something. She was trying to talk. She kept looking at the doorway, and I panicked. The word panicked hit me wrong. Like she was trying to wrap all of this in soft cotton, so she didn't have to say the real part. What exactly did you panic about, Lauren? She squeezed her eyes shut. Just please. No. I said again, quieter this time but firmer. Say it. She looked at Dad, at our aunt, at the table full of people who had no business being part of this conversation but were too stunned to leave. Then she looked at me. Her face crumpled, not the fake polite sadness she usually wore, but something raw, terrified, almost childlike. She always talked about you, she whispered. Especially at the end. Every day it was you. You. She asked if you were coming. She asked if you'd be okay. She asked if you hated her. And her voice cracked completely. I couldn't handle it anymore. I stared at her, not understanding. You couldn't handle Mom loving me? It wasn't that, she whispered. It was that she loved you in a way she didn't love me. The room felt like it tilted sideways. Even Dad looked blindsided. Lauren, what are you talking about? She wiped her face with trembling hands. She always felt guilty about him, she said, looking at me again. Everything with him. Everything he went through. Every mistake she made. I was the easy kid. I didn't need anything. But him. She pointed at me with a shaking finger. He was her regret. He was her apology. He was the person she never stopped worrying about. I felt something inside me twist. Not triumph. Not validation. Something darker. Something hollow. And that bothered you? I asked quietly. She nodded once, tiny, ashamed. Yes, it did. Dad looked stricken. Why would you never say anything? Because she was dying, she hissed, voice cracking. And I didn't want to make anything worse. And then that night, she was asking for him again. And I'd been sitting by her for hours, and she could barely speak. And when she asked someone to get a paper and pen, I thought, God, I don't know what I thought. I thought she was choosing him again, even when she was barely conscious. So you kept me out, I said. She broke, fully broke. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry. Everyone at the table was staring at her like she'd just confessed to arson. My aunt had her hand over her mouth. One cousin actually whispered something that sounded like, holy shit. Dad leaned back in his chair like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Lauren, he said slowly, that was your mother's last night. I know, she cried. I know. And I can't undo it. Silence filled the room again. Thick, suffocating. I held the note between two fingers. Mom wanted me there. And you made sure I wasn't. She didn't try to deny it. Didn't try to soften it. She just nodded, sobbing. I never wanted you to see that note, she whispered. Because I knew if you did, you'd hate me. And here's the thing. I didn't hate her. But I didn't forgive her either. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I folded the note again, slowly, deliberately, and slid it back into my pocket. Then I stood up. I'm done, I said quietly. And I walked out. When I walked out of the dining room, nobody followed me right away. I heard murmurs behind me, whispers, chairs shifting, someone starting to cry. But I just kept walking. The hallway felt too narrow, the air too heavy. I stepped outside onto the porch, the cold November air hitting me like someone throwing water in my face. It grounded me just enough to keep me from completely imploding. I sat on the top step and put my head in my hands. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But there's this weird emotional dead zone you hit when something breaks inside you and you're too stunned to react. It's not numbness. It's something deeper. Like your mind is standing in the doorway looking at all the shattered pieces on the floor and going, okay, what now? I heard the door open behind me after a couple minutes. I expected Dad, maybe my aunt, maybe even one of my cousins trying to pretend they understood grief well enough to give advice. But it was Lauren. She stepped outside slowly, like she was afraid the porch would collapse under her. She sat 2 steps below me, leaving enough distance that I couldn't feel her body heat. The kind of distance you keep when you know you're the reason someone is hurting. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. I didn't know what the note said, she finally whispered. Not exactly. You didn't need to know what it said to know what you were taking away from me. She winced like the words physically hit her. I know. The wind blew across the yard. Someone inside closed a cabinet too loudly. Somewhere down the block a dog barked. Everything normal felt completely out of sync with the way my chest felt like it was being pried open. There were so many times, she said softly, when Mom would sit in bed and talk about you. I'd bring her tea, and she'd forget I was in the room. She'd start crying about how she wished she'd apologized for things earlier. How she didn't want you thinking she didn't love you. How she was scared that you'd spend your whole life thinking you were the mistake. My breath caught in my throat. She said that. She nodded. More than once. And every time she said it, it felt like she was choosing you over me. Even when I was the one staying overnight at the hospital. Even when I was the one writing down medication times and talking to doctors and changing her sheets and holding her when she cried. Her voice shook. I know it's selfish. I know I sound awful. But it felt like nothing I did mattered. Because in the end, the thing she cared about most was making sure she didn't leave this world without making peace with you. I closed my eyes. Hearing that did not make me feel vindicated. It made me feel hollow. I never wanted to be the favorite, I said quietly. I didn't want her guilt or her regret. I would have taken half of the attention you got as kids and been happy with it. I know, Lauren whispered. And that's what made it harder. She finally looked up at me. Really looked. Her eyes were red, her face pale, her hands shaking in her lap. That night, she said, voice barely audible, she tried to say your name. She tried to ask for you. She was so weak she could barely breathe, and she kept looking toward the door. And all I could think was, she didn't ask for me. She didn't want me. She wanted you. That wasn't my fault. I know, she said immediately. I know it wasn't. But I was so angry. Not at her. Not at you, even. Just at the unfairness of all of it. I'd spent years being the responsible one. The dependable one. The one who didn't cause problems. The one who held everything together. And it never mattered. Because the one thing she cared about most in her final moments was making amends with you. It was the closest she'd come to telling me the complete truth. I took a breath. So you shut the door on me. The silence stretched. Then, with a voice barely holding itself together, she said, yes. A car passed by. Someone a few houses down lit a fire pit, the smell drifting through the wind. The world kept moving. My family kept talking inside. And Lauren sat below me on the stairs, sobbing quietly into her hands. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. Because every minute I'd spent in that hallway, every second I stood outside that door thinking my mother didn't want me, was carved into my memory with something sharper than grief. I took the note out of my pocket again. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I could recite it from memory like a prayer and a curse. She wanted me there, I said quietly. Lauren nodded without lifting her head. I know. She wrote this while I was steps away. I know. And you lied to me. That one made her flinch like she'd been struck. I did. The door behind us creaked open again. Dad stepped outside. His face was etched with worry, confusion, and something heavier, like he was trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the daughter he thought he knew. Kids, he said softly. Lauren wiped her face quickly, standing up like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. Dad looked at her, then at me, then back at her again. He didn't yell. He didn't scold. He didn't shame. He just looked shattered. Why? He asked her. Lauren opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked down at her hands. I don't have a good answer. Dad nodded, not angry, just disappointed in a way that cut deeper than anger ever could. He turned to me. Son, I'm so sorry. That almost broke me. He wasn't the one who needed to apologize. He wasn't the one who kept me out. He wasn't the one who lied. But he was the one who tried his whole life to hold a family together that never really wanted to face anything true. I exhaled slowly. I just need space, I said. He nodded. Lauren nodded too, but she looked like the word space was another punishment she wasn't ready for. I'll go, she whispered, wiping her face. I shouldn't stay. She stepped off the porch, walked to her car, and didn't look back. Dad sat down next to me on the step she'd left empty. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, your mother loved you. A lot. I know, I whispered. I just wish I'd heard it sooner. We all wish a lot of things sooner, he said. Inside, the rest of the family tried to pretend dinner was still happening. But nothing about our family would be normal after this. And the hardest part? The story wasn't over. The days after Thanksgiving felt strange, like the world had shifted a couple inches to the left and nothing lined up the way it used to. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for hours, watching the empty streets blur past the windshield. Every time I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rear view, I looked older. Not physically, just like something in me had finished breaking and was now settling into a shape I didn't recognize. I didn't talk to Lauren. She didn't call me either. Dad texted a few times. Simple things like let me know you're okay or dinner here if you want it, but he didn't push. He knew better than anyone that grief doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to space. For the first time in my life, I needed that space. I needed it like oxygen. 3 days passed before the weight of everything finally caught up to me, and not in the explosive way I expected. No yelling, no breakdown, no dramatic moment in the shower. Just this slow, steady ache in my chest that followed me everywhere. I'd be brushing my teeth and suddenly remember something small. Mom laughing at a dumb joke I made when I was 8, or the way she'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, and the ache would dig deeper. The note stayed in my pocket for those 3 days. I didn't take it out, not because it hurt too much to look at, but because somehow keeping it close made me feel like she was still reaching for me. But eventually I knew I couldn't avoid the rest of the fallout forever. Dad called me on a Tuesday. Lauren wants to talk to you, he said. His voice was cautious, like the words had sharp edges. Only if you're ready. I'm not, I said. Okay, he said gently. That's all right. But after I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall and realized something uncomfortable. Not being ready didn't matter. The conversation would happen eventually, whether I wanted it or not. And letting it drag meant letting the wound stay open. So I texted Lauren. We can talk tomorrow. Neutral place. Daylight. She responded immediately. Okay, just tell me where. We met at a small park the next afternoon. Cold, quiet, mostly empty except for a couple of joggers and an old guy feeding squirrels. Lauren showed up wearing a puffy jacket and no makeup, her hair pulled back like she didn't want any attempt at looking put together to come off as dishonest. Good. Because dishonesty was what brought us here. She stood there for a moment, arms wrapped around herself, before she said, "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, keeping my hands in my pockets. "Talk." She took a breath that looked like it physically hurt. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm not here to defend myself either. I want you to know what was happening in my head. Not to excuse it, just to explain it." "Okay." She swallowed. "I wasn't trying to punish you. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was overwhelmed. Mom was confused and scared and kept asking for you. And every time she did, I felt like I was disappearing. Like the more she thought about you, the less I existed." Her voice cracked. "I know that's not your fault. But in the moment, it felt like I didn't matter." "You mattered," I said, not out of kindness but truth. "Just not the way you wanted." She winced. "Yeah, I know." A squirrel ran across the path between us. Neither of us moved. "I made the worst decision of my life that night," she said quietly. "I let my feelings get bigger than the moment. And the moment was Mom dying. I should have stepped aside. I should have brought you in. I should have. I should have been a better sister." I didn't respond, because she was right. She looked down at her hands. "I've thought about it every day since. And I keep thinking maybe if I apologize enough, maybe if I explain enough, it'll make it hurt less. But I know it won't. Not for you. Not for me." Silence stretched between us, cold and unforgiving. Then she looked up again, eyes red but steady. "I won't ask you to forgive me, but I'm asking you not to walk away forever." I finally reached into my pocket and pulled out the note. Her breath caught when she saw it. "I've read this 100 times," I said quietly. "It didn't fix anything. It didn't undo anything. But it reminded me that Mom didn't die thinking I didn't matter to her." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "She loved you. And she loved you," I said. "Just not in the way you measured it." Her face crumpled at that. Not in guilt this time, but in something like mourning. Mourning a version of herself she'd built an entire life around. We stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. The sun started lowering, the air getting colder, the park growing quieter. Finally I said, "I'm not ready to forgive you." She nodded. "I know. But I'm not going to disappear either." She covered her mouth with her hand, choking back a sob. "Thank you. This doesn't go back to normal," I added. "It might never be normal again. I understand. And you're going to have to earn whatever comes next." "I will," she whispered. "I swear I will." We didn't hug. We didn't touch. We didn't pretend anything had been magically healed. But when we walked back toward the parking lot, side by side but not quite close, it felt like the first real thing between us in years. Something honest. Something raw. Something that wasn't built on performance or rivalry or who our mother did or didn't love enough. Before we reached our cars, Lauren stopped. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Are you going to keep the note?" I looked at her, then at the sky, then back at her. "Yeah," I said. "I am." Because it wasn't just a note. It was a bridge. A small, fragile bridge between who I thought my mother was, who she really was, and who I still had the chance to become. "Okay," she whispered. We parted ways. I drove home. And for the first time since the night in that hospital hallway, the ache in my chest didn't feel like a wound. It felt like healing. Slow. Imperfect. Real. And maybe that's all any of us ever get. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Thanks.